Welcome, and thank you for joining me on this gentle journey through time. Today, we'll be exploring a period of history often marked by struggle, survival, and the tenacious human spirit. Colonial America. The settlers of this new world faced tremendous hardships, from harsh winters to the constant threat of disease and conflict. Yet, despite these challenges, they laid the foundations for the world as we know it today. As we embark on this journey together, I encourage you to let go of the day's worries and relax. Imagine yourself stepping into the past, feeling the crisp air of an unfamiliar land, hearing the rustle of leaves in a dense forest, and sensing the weight of survival pressing on the shoulders of those who'd lived through it. The rhythms of their lives, often dictated by nature's harshest elements, may seem far removed from our comfortable, modern world. Take a deep breath, let the calm sweep over you, and let the story of colonial America unfold, gently carrying you into its world. Why, it sucked to live in colonial America. Imagine yourself stepping off a cramped ship after a long, difficult journey. The air is thick with the scent of salt and wood, a stark contrast to the familiar smells of your home. You stand on the shores of a new world, its vast, untamed land stretching before you. But as you take in the view, something is amiss. The sun beats down with intensity, yet there's a chill in the air, and the ground beneath your feet feels foreign and unwelcoming. There are no paved streets or neatly organized homes here. The land is rugged, wild, and brimming with both opportunity and danger. Colonial America wasn't the land of endless promise many imagined from afar. For those who arrived, the reality was often grim. Early settlers faced an existence where survival was the only real goal. The first thing you'd notice is the land. While it might look beautiful, nature is both generous and unforgiving. As winter approached, the biting cold would settle in, and the once green forests became ominous and lifeless. Without the luxury of modern conveniences, settlers were forced to rely on their own resourcefulness. There were no thermostats to adjust, no cozy blankets to wrap around you on cold nights. Instead, settlers would spend long hours chopping wood just to keep a fire burning. The chill would creep through the cracks in their simple homes, and the warmth from a fire often didn't reach far beyond the hearth. In those early winters, the cold was more than a mere inconvenience, it was a silent killer. Now, picture yourself as one of the many trying to grow food in this unfamiliar and often hostile land. The soil was not always fertile, and the growing seasons were short. Without modern machinery, everything had to be done by hand. The grueling labor of clearing land, planting, and harvesting was exhausting, and even after months of work, the yield was often unpredictable. The crops that thrived in Europe did not always do well in the New World. Corn, though, grew in abundance, and it became a staple of the settlers' diet, but the rest of their meals often consisted of meager, simple fare. You'd be lucky to have a varied diet, as fresh produce was often scarce, and salted meats were a common, yet unpleasant, alternative. With the constant threat of starvation looming, the settlers faced an unrelenting battle with nature. But it wasn't just the land that posed a threat. The weather, unpredictable as it was, could bring torrential rains or droughts, leaving fields flooded or parched. There was always the lurking possibility of disease, a silent menace that could wipe out an entire settlement in a matter of days. Without medical knowledge or proper sanitation, illnesses spread rapidly. Imagine the cough of a nearby neighbor, the unsettling feeling as you see your loved ones fall ill, and the helplessness that would wash over you knowing there was little to be done. But the challenges didn't stop with the land and disease. As if the struggle for survival weren't enough, the settlers also had to contend with the threat of Native American tribes. The land they had come to occupy was not empty. It was home to diverse and established communities. Though many of the tribes initially helped the newcomers by offering guidance, the tension soon mounted as the settlers expanded further, taking more land. What began as a fragile coexistence would often devolve into violent conflict. Attacks, both sudden and calculated, left entire communities vulnerable, never knowing when they might come under assault. And when the seasons changed, bringing with them the promise of warmth, the threat didn't disappear. Disease, now perhaps more easily spread in the warm months, continued to haunt the settlers, and even in their most hopeful moments, the settlers lived with an ever-present fear, the fear that the land they had come to, with such high hopes, could take it all away in an instant. As you stand there, in the midst of this harsh world, you feel the weight of survival pressing on you. You understand, with an undeniable clarity, that each day is a small victory against the land, the elements, and the unknown. The rhythm of your life is one of constant labor and caution, never fully knowing if your efforts will be rewarded. Yet, there's an undeniable sense of resilience among those around you, a quiet determination that keeps the settlement alive, one step at a time. This is the heart of life in colonial America, hard, unpredictable, and ever on the edge of survival. The life of Benjamin Franklin now, as we gently step away from the everyday struggles of the early settlers. We find ourselves in the world of one of colonial America's most prominent figures, a man whose life, marked by ambition, curiosity, and unparalleled skill, would leave an indelible mark on the history of the young nation. Imagine, for a moment, that you are in Philadelphia, bustling city of cobblestone streets, shops lined with exotic goods, and the scent of freshly baked bread wafting through the air. Here, in the mid-1700s, Benjamin Franklin walks the streets. He is not the wizened old man often depicted in portraits, but rather a young, energetic figure with a sharp mind and boundless curiosity. Born in 1706, Franklin's early life was far from easy. He grew up in a modest home with his father, a candle maker, and his numerous siblings. As a boy, he had to make do with what little was available, often working to help support the family. His thirst for knowledge was not easily quenched, and while he had little formal schooling, he devoured books with a voracious appetite. By the age of 12, he had already set his sights on self-education. Imagine the dim light of the small house, the rustling of pages turning as a young Franklin devoured every book he could get his hands on, teaching himself everything from grammar to philosophy. But Franklin's story wasn't solely one of books and intellect. He also had an eye for opportunity. At the age of 12, he was apprenticed to his brother, who ran a printing press. It was here, among the clatter of type and the smell of ink, that Franklin first honed his skills as a writer and a publisher. His creativity found an outlet through the newspaper, and before long, Franklin was writing under a pseudonym, his most famous persona being Silence Doll, a widow whose witty and often satirical letters were published without revealing Franklin's true identity. In his early 20s, Franklin embarked on a journey to set up his own printing business. By the time he was 30, he had achieved considerable success. But Franklin was never satisfied with just one achievement. He had an insatiable curiosity about the world, and this led him to pursue multiple avenues of interest. His love for scientific inquiry saw him conducting experiments with electricity, a pursuit that would earn him international fame. You can almost feel the static in the air as Franklin, holding a kite in one hand and a key in the other, made his famous experiment during a thunderstorm. The storm raged around him, the wind howling and the rain falling in torrents. But Franklin, ever the pioneer, was undeterred in his pursuit of knowledge. His experiments led to the invention of the lightning rod, a simple yet revolutionary device that saved countless lives and buildings from the destructive force of storms. But Franklin's brilliance didn't stop at science. He was also an astute diplomat, using his natural charm and keen intellect to navigate the delicate world of politics. By the time the American Revolution loomed on the horizon, Franklin had become one of the foremost voices advocating for independence. He was sent to France, where he charmed the French court and secured critical support for the American cause. Imagine Franklin, dressed in his trademark simple clothing, his calm demeanor masking the tremendous weight of his mission, as he negotiated the future of a nation with powerful European allies. Through all of these achievements, Franklin's life was a careful balancing act between intellect and pragmatism, between lofty ideals and practical realities. But even amidst his great successes, Franklin was far from immune to the trials of life. His relationships, particularly with his son William, were strained by differing views on loyalty to the crown. As a father, Franklin faced personal heartbreak, the pain of a family divided by the very cause he had dedicated his life to. Yet, despite these struggles, Franklin's legacy endured. His contributions to American society, to science, and to politics laid the foundation for the New World. Through Franklin's story, we see a life marked by relentless curiosity and ambition. His was a life filled with moments of brilliance, but also moments of profound personal and professional difficulty. Even amidst the chaos and conflict, Franklin's ability to balance intellect with practicality allowed him to shape a nation's future. As we leave Franklin behind, let us gently reflect on the complexity of his life, the quiet resilience beneath his achievements, the intellectual curiosity that drove him forward, and the personal sacrifices he made for the greater good. The mystery of Roanoke. As we leave behind the life of Benjamin Franklin, let us travel back in time to the early days of colonial America, a land of promise, yet filled with uncertainty and danger. Among the many mysteries of this time, there is one that still captivates historians and enthusiasts alike: the mysterious disappearance of the Roanoke colony, a story that remains unsolved to this day. Imagine, if you will, that you're standing on the shores of an isolated island off the coast of North Carolina. It is the summer of 1587, and a group of settlers, led by John White, has just arrived to establish a new colony. The air is warm, filled with the scent of salt water and the rustling of palm fronds in the breeze. The settlers, hopeful and eager, look to the future, believing that they will thrive in this new land. But little do they know, their fate will become one of the greatest mysteries in American history. John White, the governor of the Roanoke colony, was forced to return to England for supplies just a few weeks after the settlement's establishment. His departure was not uncommon in the early days of colonization. Supplies were always scarce, and voyages back to England were long and dangerous. White left behind his daughter, Eleanor Dare, his son-in-law, Ananias Dare, and his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World. The year passed slowly for those left behind, as they anxiously awaited White's return. However, when White finally returned to Roanoke 3 years later in 1590, he was met with an unsettling silence. The settlement, which had once buzzed with the activity of a growing colony, was now eerily empty. Not a single settler was in sight. The homes and buildings stood intact, but there was no sign of life, no traces of those who had once called this place home. White's heart must have pounded in his chest as he stepped ashore, searching desperately for any sign of his daughter, his granddaughter, or any of the colonists. The only clue he found was the word Croatoan carved into a tree. It was the name of a nearby Native American tribe, but beyond this cryptic message, there were no answers. The fate of the Roanoke colony remains a puzzle that has never been solved. Were they taken by the Croatoan tribe? Did they succumb to disease or starvation? Or did they somehow manage to disappear, vanishing without a trace? Theories abound, but the truth remains elusive. Over the centuries, many have speculated about what happened to the Roanoke settlers. Some believe they integrated with the Native American tribes, surviving by adapting to their new environment. Others think the colonists may have tried to relocate and were lost in the dense forests, their settlement eventually overtaken by the wilderness. Archaeological digs have uncovered evidence of contact between the settlers and Native American tribes, but nothing concrete has emerged to confirm any of these theories. The mystery of Roanoke is compounded by the passage of time. Evidence is sparse, and what we know is often fragmented. There are no written records to provide clarity, only the cryptic word carved into the tree and the few surviving accounts. It is a riddle that continues to intrigue and frustrate, offering no resolution, only questions. In a way, this unsolved mystery mirrors the larger struggles of colonial America. The settlers who arrived in this new world were often at the mercy of forces beyond their control: harsh climates, disease, conflict, and uncertainty. The settlers of Roanoke, like so many others, were caught in the fragile balance between survival and disaster, their hopes and dreams swallowed up by the unpredictable forces of nature. As we step away from this mystery, let us pause and reflect on the uncertainty that defined the lives of early colonists. The colonists at Roanoke sought a new life, but their journey, like so many others, ended in ambiguity. Perhaps, in a way, it is this very uncertainty that makes their story so captivating, for it is a reminder of the fragility of human existence in the face of nature's vastness and unpredictability. Life in the elite colonial household now. Let's shift our focus from the struggles of the early settlers, the harsh realities of survival, and the enigmatic disappearance of Roanoke. In doing so, we will look at a different facet of colonial life of privilege and comfort, vastly different from the daily grind faced by the common colonist. Life in the elite colonial household was, by contrast, marked by luxury, power, and a sharp division between the haves and the have-nots. Imagine yourself stepping into a grand colonial mansion, the walls adorned with intricate carvings, the floors polished wood, and the air filled with the scent of freshly prepared meals and fine tobacco. This is the world of the colonial elite landowners, merchants, and aristocrats who lived far removed from the struggles of survival faced by their poorer counterparts. These grand homes stood in stark contrast to the humble dwellings of the common colonists, offering a glimpse into the social hierarchy that defined colonial society. The elite in colonial America were often wealthy landowners, their fortunes built on the labor of enslaved people and indentured servants. These estates were vast, sprawling plantations that stretched as far as the eye could see, often cultivated with tobacco, rice, or indigo. The sound of horses' hooves on the dirt roads, the calls of servants carrying baskets, and the rustle of plantation workers in the fields were part of the daily rhythm of these estates. The lives of the wealthy, though comfortable in many respects, were far from simple. Much like the settlers on the front lines of the colonies, they were also subject to the forces of nature, to the whims of trade markets, and to the constant struggle for political power. Inside these homes, the luxury of the elite became apparent. Fine china was used for every meal, while the scent of roasted meats and freshly baked bread wafted through the house. Wealthy families dined in grand dining rooms, often hosting long, leisurely meals that could last for hours. The table was laden with a variety of food stews, pies, fruits, and meats, prepared by an army of cooks, servants, and slaves. The abundance was palpable, with platters so large they almost seemed to overflow. Yet, despite the luxury, there was always a certain awareness of the fragile world outside the threat of disease, the instability of the economy, and the tension between the colonies and Britain. As you sit in one of these dining rooms, you feel the weight of wealth and privilege in the air. The guests around you are dressed in fine silks and wool, their clothing embroidered with the finest threads, their wigs perfectly styled. The conversation is measured, often centered on politics or business, and the atmosphere is one of refined sophistication. The elite were not only wealthy, but they also held considerable power. Political decisions were often made behind closed doors in the drawing rooms of these estates, where the future of the colony and its relationship with the crown was discussed in hushed tones. Yet, despite their wealth, life in the elite colonial household was not without its challenges. Maintaining the status quo of wealth and power required constant effort. Political alliances had to be carefully cultivated, especially in the volatile world of colonial America, where loyalty to the British crown was often tested by the desire for independence. The elite had to navigate this political landscape with finesse, always aware of the tensions building around them. In these homes, the fear of revolt, the looming shadow of rebellion, was never far from their minds. The delicate balance of maintaining order on the estate, managing the labor force, and keeping up appearances often weighed heavily on their shoulders. Moreover, the comforts of wealth did not shield the elite from the harsh realities of colonial life. Disease, like malaria and smallpox, ravaged the population indiscriminately, affecting both the rich and the poor. The constant threat of war with Native American tribes, and later with the British, kept the elite on edge, knowing that the balance of power could shift at any moment. Life in the colonial mansion was not as secure as it might have seemed from the outside. Still, for all its challenges, life in the elite colonial household stood in stark contrast to the daily existence of the common settler. The elite lived in an insulated world, where food, shelter, and luxury were within reach, where the burdens of survival were borne by others. Their lives were defined by power, wealth, and the constant need to maintain that status. But they were also shaped by the ever-present knowledge that the world outside was fraught with uncertainty and danger. As we reflect on this life of contrast, let us gently consider the divisions that marked colonial society, the sharp line between those who lived in comfort and those who struggled to survive. The elite lived with a sense of entitlement to their privilege, yet their wealth was often built on the backs of enslaved people and indentured servants, those whose labor was invisible but indispensable to the prosperity of the colonial world. The grandeur of their lives, the elegance of their homes, and the luxury of their meals were a far cry from the harshness of daily life for most others. And yet, even they were not immune to the uncertainty of the colonial experience, a reminder that, in the end, no one was truly secure. As we come to the end of our journey through colonial America, we pause to reflect on the complexities of life in this early period of history, from the unrelenting struggles of survival to the mysteries that remain unsolved. We have seen the diverse lives of those who shaped this new world. The settlers, fighting to carve out a place for themselves in an unforgiving land. The great minds like Benjamin Franklin, whose intellect and diplomacy helped pave the way for a new nation. The disappearance of the Roanoke colony, a haunting mystery that continues to intrigue us. And the contrast between the lives of the wealthy elite and the common colonist soul of these stories are intertwined, shaping the future of the Americas. In closing, let us consider the resilience of those who lived through these times. They faced hardships that seem unimaginable today, yet they pushed forward, carving a life from the wilderness, from uncertainty, and from danger. And as we sit comfortably in the present, with the soft hum of modern life around us, we can reflect on how far we have come. The struggles of the past, though distant, are not forgotten, and they continue to shape the world in which we live. Thank you for joining me on this quiet journey through history. As you slowly drift into sleep, may you find comfort in the knowledge that the past, though far removed, has left us with stories that still resonate today. Sweet dreams, and good night.